The Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the 25th chapter. Jesus said to the disciples, "Then the kingdom of heaven will be like this. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 of them were wise. When the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a shout, 'Look, here is the bridegroom, come out to meet him.' Then all those bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the wise replied, 'No, there will not be enough for you and for us. You'd better go to the dealers and buy some for yourself.' And while they went to buy it, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the other bridesmaids came also, saying, 'Lord, Lord, open to us.' But he replied, 'Truly I tell you, I do not know you. Keep awake, therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour.'" The Gospel of our Lord. Parables are feral stories, ordinary domestic images rewilded in the telling, so that nothing behaves as you would expect it to. Just when we believe we understand how to handle the tale and reach out our hand to claim it, it bites us. Suddenly we know for the first time that we never really understood it at all. As Amy Jill Levine says, parables contain a surplus of meaning, and reducing parables to a single meaning destroys their aesthetic as well as their ethical potential. And everywhere Jesus went, he told tales like this, feral little stories with a surplus of meaning that resists easy allegories and single stories, with provocations and disturbances and reminders and confrontations that could not be contained. Is it a parable of preparation? A parable of waiting? A parable on getting shut out? A parable on being invited in? A parable on the reign of God to come? Or a parable about the reign of God in the here and now? Well, it matters where you are when you hear the story. The 5 bridesmaids knocked on the door and asked to be let in to the festivities they had been waiting on, anticipating. The festivities that took them out in the middle of the night for oil. And on the other side of that locked door, they can hear the music and the clinking of silverware against plates and the clanking glasses and the raucous laughter. And they hear someone coming to the door and they see the shadow pass across the peephole, and they're ready to get in on the party. They can't wait to see what's going on. They can't wait to join their friends. And they say, "We're back. We got extra oil. We're ready to party. Open up." And the voice from the other side of the door responds, "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" It's a story about waiting, anticipation, longing, excitement, and rejection. Shut out, doors locked tight. This could be a very American parable if you read it that way. We've lived by it faithfully, preparing for the party, stocking up on supplies, getting ready for the doors to open, and when there at the door are our neighbors who don't have the proper preparations, we say, "Hey, don't look at us. You're on your own." And when they spend all night working for what we already have in abundance, but refuse to share, and they come back to rejoin the party, we take cruel delight in looking through the peephole and saying, "Who is this? Do I know you? If you're on the wrong side of the sword, or the gun, or the slave ship, or the border, or the wall, or the checkpoint, or the prison gate, or the wrong side of town, or the wrong side of the tracks, or the wrong side of the soup kitchen feeding line, then have we got a parable for you. And churches are well-versed in that reading, as well-versed as any. I'll tell you a story about some of my ancestors in the faith. It happened like this. A small group of gay parishioners at a Catholic parish talked to their priest about their same-sex attraction. And the priest's response was this: every Sunday, when those parishioners came to the altar rail, knelt to receive the elements of Eucharist, the priest would come to one of those gay members and pass them by to serve the next person. And he did this week after week, and week after week they came to the altar rail, to the communion meal, and he passed them by. They were disturbed by this. Some of their fellow parishioners were disturbed by this, and they went down the street and rented space in a hotel lounge, and they pulled together a couple of cocktail tables as a makeshift altar, and they began the very first church that was started by gay people for a space of inclusion for LGBTQ people. And they called it the Eucharistic Catholic Church, named for that element of their faith that was denied them but never would be again. What's most remarkable about this story to me is that it started in 1946 in Atlanta, Georgia. And it started as a church that was racially integrated in the Jim Crow South. And a church where Christians can belong and where non-Christians could belong, church for Protestants, Catholics, and other. It's a story of audacious faithfulness. And it's a story that hardly any of us know. Is this a parable about not being enough? Not having enough? Not doing enough? It's the way we've often read it, as if these 5 so-called foolish bridesmaids left the house to go wait on the bridegroom, and they arrive and just said, oh, screw it, we're not going to bring anything with us. We'll just get it from our neighbors. But that's not how it went at all. They brought what they thought they needed, and it simply wasn't enough. Because the groom was late to his own party. They were waiting, expecting, prepared as they thought they should be, and he just didn't show up. Then, when his caravan was on the horizon, and no one would let them borrow a little oil, they went out in the dark at midnight. And they tried everything to get more oil, to be a part of the celebration, to illumine the night around the bride and the groom. And they got the oil they needed, and they came all the way back to the party, and they were shut out. And if you're reading this parable from the perspective of a persecuted minority, shut out of your own houses of worship, striking out on your own to follow a sense of call, and now finally you're on the inside, fine. Maybe that's an appropriate reading, and maybe closer to the place where Jesus' original hearers were. But for many of us in the dominant religious tradition, many of us in the dominant racial group, many of us in the dominant socioeconomic class, many of us within the dominant colonial power, that reading of the parable means death. If we don't read the parable as a moralistic tale about preparation, we could see it as a lesson on waiting as a practice of faithfulness. Now, not waiting in lieu of working, not waiting in helpless anticipation, but waiting for something to arrive over which we have no real control. We can work to bring it about, we can watch faithfully for it to come, but ultimately we are not the masters of the universe that we thought we were. If we see this parable as that kind of story, about a spirituality of waiting, we might hear it saying something like, the kingdom of heaven is like 10 people who set out for a party. But when they arrived, the lights were out, and neither the host nor the honored guest had yet arrived. So they waited unexpectedly. What is frustrating your sense of purpose? Your sense of work? Your sense of movement in life right now, because you've had to wait when you didn't expect to. Not because you didn't try, not because you were unprepared, not because you did anything wrong, but because there was a delay that you didn't anticipate. Recognizing the unanticipated period of waiting can itself be liberating of the shame or the disappointment or the frustration that you feel. The kingdom of heaven is like suddenly finding yourself waiting unexpectedly. You were prepared for the journey, just not for the waiting. But when you do make it on the inside, some won't get there with you. So when you're inside the party, celebrating how well things have gone, how great it is to finally be there after a long journey and hard work and lots of unexpected waiting, will you remember those who did not make it with you? Or will you be like the bridesmaids on the inside who neither recognized nor remembered their own friends who didn't get inside with them? Did they feel it? Did they feel the weight of forgetting? I feel it every day right now. The looming portent of amnesia, the weight of silences that we agree to keep. It makes it hard to teach and hard to write and hard to worship and hard to sleep. When we all move through our days with the weight of Israel and Gaza in our hearts, but keep it in, because we hold different political perspectives and historical understandings, so we silently drag the heaviness of a multitude of corpses around with us wherever we go. And I wonder how long before we forget any of this ever happened. When you're celebrating how great it is to have hope and to have persistence paid off, and what a joy it is to believe in progress again, will you temper your revelry with lament for those who died along the journey in the waiting hours? Those who continue to demand something more from us, even as we have nearly forgotten who they were in the first place. And as for you who wait, for whatever you're waiting on, remember that what you're doing to get where you're going, what you're doing to bring about the anticipated day, what you're doing to work with persistence and hope and diligence may be entirely missing the point. Because the kingdom of God might just be realized right there where you are, in the waiting hours. After all, the parable ends with the admonition, keep awake, not be prepared. So when Jesus starts these slippery little feral stories with a surplus of meaning and an unexpected bite with the words, the kingdom of heaven is like, perhaps he isn't inviting us to allegorize or moralize or decode or find the meaning at all. Maybe what he means is the reign of God is like what you're about to feel in your bones when you hear this story. Provocations, disturbances, reminders, confrontations that cannot be contained and that will linger longer than you wish them to. I often wonder what happened in people's conversations and imaginations after they heard one of these stories, walking away asking, I wonder what happened next. Because the work of the parable isn't finished as soon as the story is over. What happens next when half the people in the story wait all night for the party, expecting to be inside, showing up as prepared as they could be, but falling short, and working all night to do whatever it takes to get in, and are still shut out. When they see the shadow over the peephole and hear the voice of the other side of the door saying, "Do I know you?" I imagine them realizing in that moment that the whole game was set up to keep them out from the get-go. And they look at each other, and they look at their flasks now full of oil, and they look at their torches, and they look back at the door, locked tight with the sounds of the reveling crowds inside, and they get an idea.